Rebecca Joines, a former high school teacher from Manchester, was convicted and imprisoned for engaging in sexual activities with two male students, both aged 15 at the time of the offenses. Joines abused her position of trust at a Manchester school by grooming and sexually exploiting two pupils. She began contact with the first boy through Snapchat after creatively sharing her phone number as a math exercise. This led to flirty communication, outings, including buying him a 350-pound Gucci belt, and ultimately sexual intercourse at her flat when he was 15. She was arrested and suspended after evidence of sexual activity with boy A was uncovered. While on bail, Joines initiated a relationship with a second 15-year-old boy. This second sexual relationship only stopped when she was arrested for a second time. Joines became pregnant by one of the boys while on bail following her initial arrest, and the child was placed into care shortly after birth. This is the disturbing story of Rebecca Joines, a teacher who turned her classroom into something far darker than a place of learning. And to know how it all started, we need to go back to the beginning. Rebecca Joines entered the world on December 30th, 1993, in northwest England. By all accounts, her childhood appeared unremarkable. She had a younger sister named Isabel, and parents who supported her ambitions. Those who knew her described a quiet, introverted young woman who excelled in athletics, gymnastics, cheerleading, and dance consumed much of her youth. But beneath the surface, struggles emerged. Rebecca battled eating disorders and faced bullying during her school years, though the specifics remain unclear. Whether these experiences shaped what came later is impossible to say, but they painted a picture of someone grappling with internal turmoil. Her academic path seemed purposeful and admirable. She pursued sports and exercise science at Liverpool John Moore University, then specialized in teaching underprivileged children through a 2-year qualification program. She didn't stop there. Rebecca earned a postgraduate degree in secondary mathematics from Edge Hill University. On paper, she looked like an ideal educator, someone genuinely committed to helping young people. In 2018, she secured a full-time position teaching mathematics at a Manchester school. She was 24 years old, beginning what should have been a rewarding career. But her personal life was in turmoil. A 9-year relationship, one that had begun when she was just 15, had recently ended. This relationship with her high school sweetheart had been rocky. Friends later described Rebecca as intensely jealous and possessive, constantly questioning where her boyfriend was and who he was with. The paranoia eventually drove them apart. The breakup devastated her. Rebecca found herself lonely, isolated, feeling adrift in ways she hadn't anticipated. Instead of seeking appropriate support or focusing on healing, she would make choices that destroyed lives, including, ultimately, her own. Walking through the hallways of her school, Rebecca began noticing something. The older male students, 15, 16, 17 years old, were looking at her differently. Teenage boys, with all their bravado and hormones, started making comments. They gave her a nickname, Bunda Becky, a crude reference to her physical appearance. Any reasonable adult, any professional educator, would immediately shut down such inappropriate behavior. A teacher's responsibility is crystal clear: maintain boundaries, redirect inappropriate attention, and model respectful behavior. But Rebecca didn't do that. Instead, she found herself drawn to the attention. These boys made her feel noticed, attractive, desired in ways she hadn't felt since her relationship ended. They weren't complicated like adult men. They didn't expect maturity or emotional reciprocity. They simply admired her, and in her loneliness, that felt good. This is where the line was first crossed. Not physically, not yet, but psychologically. The moment Rebecca allowed that inappropriate attention to affect her, the moment she began to seek validation from children rather than shutting it down, she started down a path that would end in devastating consequences. In October 2021, during an ordinary math class, a 15-year-old student, identified in court documents only as boy number 1, made a request that should have been immediately refused. He asked his teacher for her phone number. This wasn't subtle. The boy had been openly expressing his attraction, making inappropriate comments, testing boundaries the way adolescents do. He was waiting for the adult to establish limits, to remind him of appropriate behavior. Instead, Rebecca turned it into a game. She gave him several digits of her phone number and challenged him to guess the final one. Think about that for a moment. An adult woman, a professional educator, created a puzzle for a child to solve in order to contact her privately. She didn't say no. She didn't redirect. She engaged, encouraged, and invited. The boy quickly guessed correctly and called her immediately, right there in the classroom. Rebecca heard her phone ringing from her purse, seemed surprised he'd actually figured it out, but didn't answer since she was teaching. Moments later, a text message arrived. "Are you going to ignore me then? I see how it is." And so it began. The messages flowed back and forth over the next several days. Flirty texts where the boy claimed he was distracted in math class, and Rebecca responded with coy comments that encouraged rather than discouraged. The conversation migrated to Snapchat, where messages would disappear after 24 hours, convenient for someone who understood the need to hide evidence. The messages weren't explicitly sexual at first, but they were suggestive, inappropriate, and absolutely should never have been happening. A teacher messaging privately with a 15-year-old student, engaging in flirtation, erasing the professional boundaries that exist for crucial reasons. This was grooming, textbook grooming. Then Rebecca took it further. She posted a photo on her Snapchat story showing herself at a shopping mall. The boy responded, "When are you taking me?" Most adults would ignore such a message or firmly establish boundaries. Rebecca instead made plans. She told him to meet her after school that Friday. They would go to the mall together, she said, and afterward he could come to her apartment. When he suggested he might as well stay over, she agreed. A teacher was arranging a sleepover with her 15-year-old student. That Friday afternoon, the boy went home from school, changed out of his uniform, packed an overnight bag, and told his mother he was sleeping at a friend's house. His mother had no reason to suspect anything else. Why would she? Her son's teacher surely wasn't arranging secret meetings with him. Rebecca picked him up a few streets away from his home, careful not to be seen. They made a stop first, collecting her dog and dropping it at her parents' house. She actually had the boy lie down in the car so her parents wouldn't see him. She parked blocks away from their home for the same reason. These weren't the actions of someone who thought what they were doing was innocent. During the drive to the mall, Rebecca made a comment about driving. The boy responded, "I wouldn't know because I'm not old enough." Let that sink in. He wasn't old enough to drive. He wasn't old enough for many things, but he was being taken on a date by his teacher. Rebecca chuckled and told him to shut up, dismissing the very real fact of his age. At the mall, a public space where anyone might have seen them, Rebecca took the boy into an expensive store and bought him a Gucci belt priced at £345, approximately $460. Surveillance footage captured this transaction. In the video, Rebecca leans against the counter, smirking as the boy examines the belts, clearly pleased with herself. This expensive gift wasn't generosity. It was a calculated grooming tactic. Predators often give gifts to make victims feel special, to create a sense of obligation, to buy silence. The judge in this case would later identify it explicitly as grooming. After shopping, surveillance cameras captured them entering her apartment complex. The boy would later testify that walking up those stairs, he felt something was weird about the situation. He sat on her couch and asked what she wanted to do. She turned the question back on him. He replied, "I think you know what I want to do." She laughed. They began talking about intimate subjects. Then they kissed. And then Rebecca sexually assaulted a 15-year-old boy. Twice that evening. A child who wasn't old enough to drive, who had to lie to his mother about where he was, who was in no position to truly understand or consent to what was happening. The boy later admitted he didn't ejaculate the first time. It all felt too strange. After they showered together, the assault happened again. This time his DNA would be left on her bedsheets, evidence that would later prove crucial. The next morning, Rebecca left early to go shopping, leaving the boy alone in her apartment with her key and the key fob to enter the building. Why would he need those to leave? He wouldn't. Was she already giving him access to return whenever he wanted? The implications are disturbing. When the boy returned home, his mother noticed something immediately: a hickey on his neck. She began questioning where he'd really been, given he claimed to have stayed with friends. The boy tried to maintain the lie, but he did message Rebecca, warning her his mother was suspicious. Rebecca's response was telling. She better not find out. But secrets like this rarely stay buried in high schools. The boy eventually told friends what happened. Teenage boys being teenage boys, the rumor spread rapidly through the school. When administrators got wind of what had allegedly occurred, they acted. On the following Monday, boy number one's mother was called to the school and informed about the situation. Rebecca heard that the school knew. Panic set in. She reached out to another one of her students, a friend of boy number one, whom we'll call boy number two, and asked for help. This teenage boy helped her reset her phone to factory settings, erasing the evidence of her communications with boy number one. But evidence deletion couldn't erase the truth. Boy number one had already confessed. The school suspended Rebecca and contacted police. Officers arrived and arrested her on suspicion of sexual activity with a child. The arrest video shows Rebecca standing with her arms folded, seemingly unfazed as officers inform her of the charges. She even asked if they were serious, if they were really going to arrest her. The audacity is remarkable. Yes, they were serious. She had sexually assaulted a child she was supposed to protect. Rebecca was released on bail with one explicit condition: no unsupervised contact with anyone under 18 years old. You would think that would be enough. You would think facing criminal charges for sexually assaulting a student would make someone stop and reconsider everything. You would be wrong. Remember the student who helped Rebecca delete evidence from her phone? Boy number two, the friend of her first victim? While out on bail, while suspended from her job, while facing criminal charges for child sexual abuse, Rebecca began messaging this boy too. At the end of 2021, boy number two reached out to her via Snapchat. Instead of ignoring him, instead of recognizing she was already facing charges for this exact behavior, Rebecca engaged. The messages turned flirty. He asked for inappropriate photos. She sent him a picture of herself in her underwear. They arranged to meet in person at her apartment in January 2022. During this meeting, Rebecca sat on his lap and they kissed intensely on two separate occasions. According to later testimony, she told him they would have to wait to have sex until his birthday. He was about to turn 16, the legal age of consent in England. The boy agreed to wait. On February 4, 2022, shortly after his 16th birthday, they met again. This time they had sex. It was his first time. The boy later remembered the date clearly because he had tickets to a soccer game he'd been excited about, but he canceled those plans to be with Rebecca instead. Think about that. A teenage boy giving up something he'd been looking forward to because an adult woman had groomed him into believing their relationship was special, important, mutual. But this wasn't a relationship. It was assault. Even though 16 is the legal age of consent in England, teachers cannot engage sexually with their students under 18. The power dynamic, the position of trust, these make consent impossible. The law recognizes this. Rebecca either didn't understand or didn't care. Over the next 18 months, Rebecca would sexually assault boy number two at least 5 more times before he graduated in June 2022. Throughout this period, she became increasingly possessive and controlling. The boy began to think she was acting strangely, that she needed help, that she should be spending time with people her own age instead of teenagers. He recalled one incident where she showed up crying where he was hanging out with friends, and he had to go to her car to calm her down. The dynamic had become twisted, a teenager having to provide emotional support to an adult woman who was abusing him. They were having unprotected sex. Rebecca told him it was nearly impossible for her to get pregnant due to a health condition. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? He was inexperienced, young, and she was an adult who should have known better. In March 2023, Rebecca revealed she was pregnant. She was pregnant while still on bail for her first sexual assault charge. The situation had spiraled completely out of control. Rebecca planned an elaborate way to tell boy number two about the pregnancy. She set up a date night with rose petals, hidden notes throughout her apartment, a scratch card revealing different sexual positions. She created a scavenger hunt that led him to discover a baby onesie with words about being a daddy. That's how a teenage boy learned he was going to be a father. Not through a caring conversation, not through responsible decision-making, but through a manipulative game created by the woman who had been abusing him. Both of them cried. Neither had planned this. The boy was in shock. How could this be happening? A few months later, in June 2023, their relationship ended. Boy number 2 finally reported everything to police and confessed to his parents. In his statement, he said, "We were irresponsible. It's my own fault. I also thought, what am I going to do? I can't hide a kid. I had hidden the relationship for 18 months from my parents." The boy felt cornered by impending fatherhood and also recognized that Rebecca's behavior had become increasingly erratic, stalking him, acting jealous, demanding to know where he was constantly. At 17 years old, he was finally understanding how disturbed the entire situation had been. Police arrested Rebecca again. Before they arrived, she reset her phone to factory settings once more. Boy number 2 did the same. Much of the evidence disappeared into digital oblivion. She was charged with additional counts of sexual activity and spent 5 months in jail before receiving bail in November 2023. In total, she faced 6 charges, 2 counts related to boy number 1, 4 counts related to boy number 2, including charges for breach of trust given her position as a teacher. Rebecca pleaded not guilty to everything. In January 2024, Rebecca gave birth to a baby girl. The child was removed from her care within 24 hours and went to live with her father, boy number 2, with help from his family. Rebecca was granted supervised visitation only. A teenage boy was now raising a baby. His entire future had been altered because a trusted adult had groomed and sexually abused him. The trial began in May 2024. The victim impact statements were heartbreaking. Boy number 2 described initially being in denial about the abuse, feeling conflicted about giving evidence against someone he thought he loved. He felt guilty, as if he had betrayed her. "I would argue until I was blue in the face protecting her and would not hear a bad word against her," he testified. "I felt as though I had betrayed someone I loved and had done wrong by giving evidence. But eventually understanding came. I was coerced and controlled, manipulated, sexually abused, and mentally abused. The months after the abuse happened to me was a very dark time. I felt backed into a corner." He spoke about how his parents tried to get him to open up, but he felt better dealing with it alone because no one could relate. He highlighted something crucial. Just because he is a male victim of abuse, he feels that his case is seen as a lesser crime. He struggled to find support groups for young males, noting plenty existed for girls and children, but not for boys his age. "I feel like sometimes these crimes go unnoticed due to men bottling things up. I hope there is an increase in these services in the future." He added that he now struggles with the idea of entering real relationships. His trust had been shattered by someone who should have protected him. Boy number 2 also said he believed Rebecca had no remorse and that her family thought she hadn't done anything wrong. Throughout the trial, Rebecca's parents attended, sitting in the gallery close to where the victim's families sat. He concluded with devastating words, "Ultimately, I will forever be Rebecca's victim and forever linked to her through our child." He had imagined having his first child in a stable environment with someone he loved, but that dream was gone. During the trial, Rebecca was seen with a pink, baby beanie tucked into her pants. The prosecution suggested she was trying to garner sympathy from the jury. When asked directly, Rebecca claimed she slept with it every night. When questioned about her actions, Rebecca's explanations were telling. She admitted she caved into the attention because she was lonely after her breakup and struggled during the pandemic isolation. She claimed she awkwardly laughed when boy number 1 made suggestive comments because she liked the attention. "I should have never engaged in any form of contact," she admitted. Yet she continued to minimize her responsibility, framing herself as the real victim, claiming teaching was her dream job that had been ruined by all of this. Not ruined by her actions, ruined by all of this. As if it had happened to her rather than being something she deliberately did. She denied being attracted to 15-year-old boys, denied grooming them, denied assault. Despite physical evidence, the DNA on her bedsheets, surveillance footage, witness testimony, text messages, she maintained she hadn't done anything truly wrong. Regarding boy number 2, she argued they were in a relationship after he turned 16 and she was no longer working at the school, so no legal offense occurred. But the law disagreed. Teachers cannot engage sexually with students under 18, regardless of other circumstances. The prosecutor confronted her directly. When an adult has an inappropriate relationship with a child of 13, 14, 15, that's the adult's responsibility. Nothing to do with a child being provocative or making the first move or trying to get the adult's number, is it? He asked pointedly. Did you have a powerful sexual attraction to boys aged 15? No, not at all, Rebecca insisted. Yet her actions told a different story. The judge, Judge Cornell, delivered a powerful statement about the nature of Rebecca's crimes. She acknowledged that on the surface, some might wonder how teenage boys could be victims of an attractive female teacher. Some might even think the boys were lucky, but that perspective was wrong. These boys were naive and vulnerable to advances from an older woman in a position of power. Young boys are just as likely to be preyed upon by female teachers as young girls are by male teachers. It's equally terrible, morally wrong, and illegal. Judge Cornell explained that Rebecca, feeling isolated and vulnerable, sought attention and validation from young boys because they were less threatening and allowed her to maintain control, something she couldn't achieve with adults her own age. The boys showed remarkable maturity in their statements. They recognized the situations were wrong but acknowledged they lacked the ability to fully understand the risks at the time. Boy number 1 described it as extremely strange and admitted he wouldn't do it again. Boy number 2 called Rebecca a pedophile and said he had sacrificed 18 months for a pedophile. Judge Cornell addressed Rebecca directly. While you seem nice, your actions were not those of a nice person. The main issue was that Rebecca was the adult responsible for caring for and protecting these boys, but she abused that trust for her own enjoyment. The boys recognized something was wrong. How could Rebecca not have realized? She ignored significant age and maturity differences, failed to maintain proper boundaries, and encouraged the boys to cross lines they shouldn't have crossed. The result? One became a father at 17. Judge Cornell noted that Rebecca might not have been attracted to young boys specifically, but rather to the power dynamic. She enjoyed being admired without the complexity of adult relationships. She enjoyed being in control, using her position, experience, independence, and resources, her car, her apartment, her job, her money, her life experience, to manipulate vulnerable children. After a 9-day trial, the jury found Rebecca guilty on all 6 charges. She was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, 4 years for activity with boy number 1, 12 months for kissing and activity with boy number 2, and 2.5 years for activity involving breach of trust with boy number 2. She was placed on the sex offender registry and made subject to a sexual harm prevention order for 10 years, restricting her contact with minors and access to certain locations. Restraining orders were issued against both boys. This case serves as a stark reminder that predatory behavior doesn't always look the way we expect. Rebecca Joins wasn't hiding in shadows. She was teaching math. She had impressive credentials and appeared professional. Yet she used her position to groom and sexually abuse children entrusted to her care. The damage extends far beyond the courtroom. Boy number 2 is raising a daughter at an age when he should be focused on finishing his own education, figuring out his future, maybe experiencing first loves with people his own age. Instead, he's forever tied to his abuser through their child. Both boys will carry psychological scars. Boy number 1 experienced something he described as strange and uncomfortable, something that violated his trust in adults and authority figures. Boy number 2 spent 18 months in what he thought was a relationship, only to realize he was being manipulated and abused. Their ability to trust, to form healthy relationships, to feel safe, all of this was damaged by someone who should have protected them. Rebecca's loneliness, her breakup, her pandemic isolation, none of these excuse her actions. Adults are responsible for managing their own emotional needs appropriately. Children are never the solution to an adult's problems. The sexual abuse of boys by female authority figures is dramatically underreported and minimized. Comments like, "Where were these teachers when I was young?" or "Those boys are lucky," are harmful and wrong. They perpetuate the dangerous myth that boys can't be victims, that sexual attention from older women is always positive. It's not. The evidence is in the victim impact statements, in the broken trust, in the teenage father, in the trauma that will likely affect these young men for years to come. This case matters because it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, about abuse, about how predators can be people we trust, people who seem professional and capable.